Namaskar. Today we are celebrating the birth anniversary, 140th birth anniversary of Madam Helen Keller. And there's a reason why we are celebrating it, because it is not just that Madam Helen Keller empowered herself. By her efforts, she gave an example how persons with deaf-blindness or severe disabilities can also bring about a change in life. They can be included amongst the list of most influential people who are there in that particular century. So today the topic of the webinar is building well-being amongst individuals with deaf-blindness and family members. I will be covering the entire topic under 6 heading. So this is Helen Keller madam. She came to India and she was welcomed by one and all. The topic is building well-being. Now building well-being is the need of every individual, every human being. And how do you understand needs? To understand needs, if we see, the best theory which has been given is the Maslowian hierarchy of needs theory. Now, this pyramid which is there, in that we know Maslow divided into a few rungs, where he said that if physiological needs, that is need for food, water, good sleep, is completed, we start thinking of safety needs, that is getting a stable job, having a house to stay, getting it secured, having a bank balance. Once that's completed, we go to the next needs like love, belongingness, esteem, and finally the self-actualization need, where a person becomes a Buddha and absolute well-being happens. Then what is the issue? Human beings are the ultimate achievement of this creation. We started up from aquatic animals and now we are what we are. A fundamental difference which differentiates us from animals is once an animal is fed out well and once the animal is not threatened for life, that is physiological and safety needs, if they are addressed, the animal can sleep down comfortably. But for a human being, once the physiological needs and safety needs are over, before they are over, there is just one thought in the human being: to have good food and to be secure. But once both the needs are over, rest, all 1,000 needs which are above them start creeping up. So that is the fundamental software difference between a human and an animal, which drives us to the next. We have this capability of thinking which drives us to the next, and we just can't be at peace like a dog, like a cow, like a pigeon once we are just fed and we are secure. The second point under which I would like to cover this topic is thoughts and language. So as I said, Madam Helen Keller was born to quite a bit of a rich family. His father was a captain, and when she was 18 months old, she became sick. She had high fever. The doctors thought she would not survive, but she survived. After the illness was gone, Helen Keller became deaf as well as blind. She could not hear, neither she could see. So what happened? So she was cut off. Her 2 far senses are gone. We have 7 senses: eyes, nose, skin, taste and smell, and 2 far senses: vestibular and proprioceptive. Vestibular is balance, proprioceptive is joints. So 2 of the major far senses were gone. So now Helen Keller had all her physiological and safety needs done because she was born to a rich family. So the other needs arose, but she was not in contact with the environment. She didn't know what to do and how to address them. This is the picture of Helen Keller's family. You can see his father was a captain, a veteran person, and mother was rich, siblings were rich. So food, safety over, thoughts kept coming in. She didn't know how to handle those thoughts. She became a baby with many tantrums. She had multiple meltdowns. Everybody was worried. She was shabby, ill-dressed, and did not have basic etiquettes. So the family approached the Perkins School for the Blind, from where they called in a fresh teacher named Annie Sullivan. Madam Annie Sullivan was the teacher who was invited to be the tutor of Helen Keller as a child. Annie Sullivan, the first day, wanted to teach Helen Keller how to have food properly, decently by social norms. So she placed her on the table with plates, spoon and fork by the side, but Helen would grab food, would stuff it into the mouth, which Annie Sullivan didn't want. She kept stopping her, but there was a tussle and a fight between them. Hair pulling, pinching were common affairs, but as a teacher, Annie Sullivan didn't lose hope. She tried exploring out other senses through which Helen could be communicated to. She used out hearing and sight were gone, so the touch sense was left out. She used out the touch sense and the joint senses. Proprioception is the joint senses. She used out the touch and the joint senses to teach Helen finger spellings, to give her touch a few things so that she could have an idea of them. One day, after months of work, the breakthrough happened. Annie Sullivan madam took Helen Keller to a tube well, and this tube well, by one hand Annie Sullivan had the tube well handle, the other hand was assisting Helen Keller to keep her hand below the nozzle, and she was pumping out with the left hand. She took her right hand and Helen's right hand, kept Helen's hand above her and spelled out W-A-T-E-R under her arms. So Annie Sullivan spelling it out under Helen's arm, and Helen Keller madam writes in her biography, "That day was liberating for me. I understood that things around me have a name to it. Things around me existed. They can be meaningfully thought about." So, language was the link which helped her to realize out her potentials. She was so impressed by Annie Sullivan's work that actually she puts down her birthday as the day when she met Annie Sullivan. In our tradition, in Indian tradition, we have a word known as Dvij, means second born, and Dvij is referred to a bird, the moon, a Brahmin, or a child who one meets his guru, because actual learning happens from them. This was not known to Helen Keller, but she felt so empowered, elated, liberated that she kept her birthday as the day when she met her teacher Annie Sullivan. With the help of language, she organized her thoughts. So thoughts are there, and here we can see language helps to organize our thoughts. This has been well said by psychologists like Lev Vygotsky, Noam Chomsky, who was a linguist, Jean Piaget, and many others. So language has its importance, and language matters. It matters because it connects people to people. You and me are together hearing this video because you understand English. Imagine you not understanding English, we both would not be connected even virtually. So one of the famous quote of Madam Helen Keller is, once she was asked if she could have either of the two senses restored, she would choose to hear rather than to see, because hearing connects people to people. If you don't hear the language, you don't learn it. If you don't speak it, people don't get connected to each other. So hearing was much more important than vision, because if you can't see, you will dash around things. That can be managed, but getting disconnected from people cannot be managed. So Helen Keller madam chose the sense of hearing over vision. That's one of the important quotations which keeps coming in. The third point which I would like to focus upon is the fact that Helen Keller madam had her hearing and her sight both gone. So the mode of management which was required could not be addressed by unidisciplinary or single disciplines. Single discipline means there are 4 ways in which we manage clients. First is the disciplinary model, in which there is just one person writing down or doing something with others. The other is the multidisciplinary model, in which there will be multiple number of people, a multi-specialty hospital type of a thing, where a person goes to each doctor, takes in the prescriptions and recommendations and implements it himself, and again goes to the other doctor. The third is the interdisciplinary model, which is slowly evolving. For example, a person has a hearing problem and a vision problem, then at least the rehabilitation officer or the rehab professional who is taking care of hearing and vision, both of them discuss about this particular case in a case conference, plan out common goals, and again they separate out. So at least a child or an adult who is coming with hearing and vision problem is coming to both of them separately, but each of them know what the therapy plan is. But the last model is known as the transdisciplinary model, which is of paramount importance, especially for people with multiple disabilities, deaf-blindness being one of them, including cerebral palsy. There are others like cerebral palsy, autism, etc. But here we are talking about deaf-blindness because, for example, teaching speech. In this particular slide, we teach speech by making the person hear the language or by seeing the card or whatever is written out, by seeing the face also. But when a person is having visual impairment, the person doesn't see. The sign language doesn't work, which usually works out for a deaf person. For blind, we can speak, they hear, and they can learn language. So, the persons who are empowered for the blind cannot alone address deaf-blindness, neither the persons who are empowered for the deaf can address deaf-blindness just with the help of sign language. So, there is a requirement of a person who synthesizes out both the professions, hearing as well as visual impairment, puts them together and empowers the other person having deaf-blindness. That's what was done by Madam Annie Sullivan. Here you can see Madam Annie Sullivan is putting one of the hands of Helen Keller on her face, one on the Adam's apple or the larynx, the other on the lips, and the third at the level of the nose. She is keeping it like this. And when I am speaking, another person is keeping her hand like this. The other person, or Helen Keller, was trained that some sounds come from the throat, some from the lips, and other from the nose, and cause out vibration of different amount in the oral and the nasal cavity and the laryngeal cavity. Getting feedback from that method is known as Tadoma. Getting feedback from that, Helen Keller learned out what language was. She was also given quite a bit of input in form of Braille. So she is having language by 2 modalities, one through Tadoma, other by Braille. The third modality was also there, where a 4-hand sign language was used. Annie Sullivan's, Helen Keller's hand, Annie Sullivan's hand, and finger spelling happening in. So 3 modalities, Tadoma, Braille, and 4-hand sign language. These were used to empower Helen Keller ma'am with language. She used out that particular language. She became a voracious reader. She is a prolific author. She met almost all the presidents of United States of America, was a statesman, became the first graduate from a university with deaf-blindness to earn a degree, wrote down approximately some 14 books. The Story of My Life, Helen Keller, was a bestseller, still inspires us. So, finally, what is the question? Does Helen Keller become normal? So the next concept, that's the 4th concept which I would like to speak about, is the concept of normalcy. This concept of normalcy, being normal is too mainstream. This concept of normalcy actually is the output of a medical model of disability, where we find out all problems in the person and we try hard that this person can be converted out into the so-called mainstream society. What do you mean by the mainstream? Statistically, if we put the bell-shaped curve, then here we can see there is a mean and there is a standard deviation or a variation. So the mean and one standard deviation is 68.3% of the population. That means any person who does things like the 68.3% of the population is a person called normal. At any point of time, by the law of nature, there would be people, some 15% this side and some 15 or 16% this side, who would either be extraordinary in the skill and some would be very poor in the skill. It may be music. We may have some Sonu Nigam, some Lata Mangeshkar, some Shreya Ghoshal on this side, and we'll be having people who would be normally singing out, bathroom singers with some amount of tune, like you and me, and some who are really poor at it and have a condition known as amusia. So this is true for any skill like mathematics, running, drawing, anything. So in general, nature creates out a group of individuals with varying amount of skills. So if we are addressing the entire group of population which is there around us, we addressing only the normal population means we are leaving out approximately 30% of the population, which is not okay for any civilized society. Keeping this in mind, there is a concept of inclusion which has come up and a concept of universal design which followed. So the fourth thing which I would like to say is the concept of inclusion. A common example which is given is, for example, if I have a child who is 8 feet tall, what do? There are two ways. One is the medical model. We have facilities. Miyot Hospital is there in Chennai. They can chop off both the legs, again rejoin it out, so that that person becomes 5'8" to 6 feet. Looks smart also, within the normal also. That's one way. The other way is, if the boy is or the girl is 8 feet tall, I make a bed which is 9 feet long and train him in basketball. So I am actually adapting out a bit to accommodate him, and I am training out him in skills in which he can excel out. The other model is the social model, in which we don't see the problem in the person, rather we try adapting out everything so that the person can be accommodated. So that's the social model in which we can address out the needs of both 16% this side, the so-called person with disabilities, or 16% that side, some people who excel or are gifted in some sense. So a society needs to address out the requirement of the population in totality. So inclusion is the only go in which a individual who is cognizant enough should be behaving out. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, quotes out somewhere, no, dharma rakshati rakshata. The dharma or the property of nature is to create out people in this diversity. If we protect out that, then the protector will protect us. Dharma rakshati rakshata. The law of nature protects the protector. So it is the eternal law as well as the fundamental requirement of a civilized society to include and empower people with different needs so that they can be a part of society. May they be requiring out to learn sign language or forehand sign language or braille or anything. Some modification is required out, and that is the reason. So here, for example, you can see this is the nameplate which I am having. This is the tabletop which I am having. Now a person who comes in finds out reading out this name to be difficult. So to accommodate that, I have a QR code here. You can scan this out. Here the name Nachiketa Raut spelled out clearly. So you know how it is done. There are some people reading out Hindi. So in Hindi also it's there. So we have two languages. There are some people who will be blind. So a bit of modification, a bit of arts, and in braille it's written. So blind can also read out. So by minimum modification, this can be read out in 2 languages, 3 scripts, and is audible also. So this is a classic example of universal design and inclusion, where I display the fact that I care. It doesn't just help out people with disabilities. It helps out everybody. Furthermore, if it is done well, it adds to the aesthetics of it also. For example, this is a Dater. Everybody's table would be having a dater. Now in this dater, all we have to do is that we have inserted out some amount of braille embossment. So even a blind person can put this dater on his table. A sighted person can also see this. So if everybody can access it, it is a universal design. That is the basic idea behind inclusion and universal design, and can be very well implemented in offices. The Accessible India campaign targets out including everybody, and these are small efforts which can be done to include everybody. Here, because Helen Keller was empowered enough, somebody like Alexander Graham Bell used to talk to her, somebody like Beethoven used to play out violin for her, and she could feel it out. The fifth concept which I would like to say is the concept of inclusion, which is actually a socio-cultural phenomenon and can easily happen in India. For the entire world, they have to reinvent the wheel. For Indians, it is an inbuilt socio-cultural thing. See, disability is not a health phenomenon. That's why it is not under the Ministry of Health. Disability is under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Samajik Nyaya evam Adhikarita. Because it is a phenomenon which has to be handled at the level of society. It is not a health phenomenon that a person has to be changed out. Now, how do we do it? By giving them facilities. There are two ways. The Western way, in which we say, give this facility, give this facility, give this facility. The Eastern way, in which, right from the beginning, we have been taught that this me, or this particular body which I am talking about, is actually the accumulation of food which I have taken. The food which I am eating makes up the body. So if one of my hands is cut off like this, I don't say I am cut off. It's just the hand which is gone. I still remain. That's why we say persons with disability. We don't say disabled person. About the identity, 70% of is water, 70% of me is water. Now this particular water is something else. Now if I drink it, this will become me. That means 70% of me is actually something which I have gathered out in form of water. The rest would be in form of air. The rest would be in form of some food, earth. So the concept of this me, the identity of me, which is known as ahamkara, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahamkara. Ahamkara, in Western philosophy, we don't have separate words for this, so it's all into mind, and there's a confusion. That's why I told inclusion can happen only in India. So this ahamkara, or the identity, actually is a myth. I am spread all over the place. It is just that we restrict ourselves into this particular thing. This is not a hypothetical phenomenon. Identity and shaping up the identity has been the fundamental to education system in India, where we have told that you are truly educated if you realize that you are not restricted to your body. We have logos, no? Sa vidya ya vimuktayat. If something liberates you beyond your physical body, that is in true sense education or vidya. It's a logo of everything, and there have been centers where this is being mastered out. For example, 180 kilometers from Chennai, we have the Chittambaram temple, where the focus was in expanding out our chitta. We don't have a word for chitta. It's working memory into the ambara, or the sky, where we extend ourselves to everything. Once we extend ourselves to everything, we don't see a person with disability as different and we as different. The facilities which are required for us should also be done for them, or rather the facilities which are made should be inclusive of them. So we don't take them separately, and they are a part of us. Taittiriya Upanishad says, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We consider the entire world to be our family. Now, once it is our family, I have a 8 feet tall son, I don't chop off his legs. I build a 9 feet long cot and train him in basketball. So I adapt out a bit so that my son can be included the way it is. So if we expand out our chitta or our acceptance to the entire world, then modifications automatically will fall in, and it will not be a separate andolan. It will not be a separate movement to implement those. Things have been done in universal design. I would like to end up with a short prayer which is again in universal design, not addressing one person, everybody. You say, Om Sahena Vavatu. Let both of us be safe. Sahenau Vunattu. Let both of us nourish ourselves together. Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina. Let our energies ascend together. Ma vid Vishavahai. Let there be no conflict in this particular work. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shanti is not peace. Let there be samata or balance which is there around by the virtue of the way the world is. So in development, we Indians never disturbed anybody. There was a mutual growth, and you can see how this particular prayer is in universal design, including all. With these words, I would like to thank all the organizers for organizing this webinar. Thanks a lot, and hope Helen Keller Madam inspires us and keeps inspiring us. Thank you.